Welcome back to another episode of the On the Ball podcast, the best potty going round, here for another NRL episode. And today we'll be reviewing finals week 1. What an awesome week it was for interesting games, all for their own reasons. We're going to take a bit more of a deep dive this week, usually because there's, 8 games, there's a lot going on. Some of the games maybe aren't that important. I sort of just skim over the games, have a brief discussion of what happened. But today I've done some research, got some stats, talked about what went wrong for teams, and so that's probably going to take a bit longer today. But there is only 4 games, so I might even out. So that should be good. Diving into a bit more into that, and then I wasn't going to do this till next week, but the Dally M Awards reportedly, it hasn't been announced, as we all know. All NRL fans know, Dally M Awards, one of the all-time worst run events ever. Not to always compare us to AFL, but the Brownlows are very official event and run very, very well. And we still don't really know the date. The source I saw today said it's over 2 days, over the 20th and the 27th. So I'm not sure what they're going to be doing differently. I don't know if they're maybe going to spend a bit more time on the Dally M vote count, which I wouldn't hate, because I do think sometimes it sort of just goes a bit quick and they just read like the top 10 people who matter, which I think is a bit stiff. I reckon, the players who get votes should be credited, if you know what I mean, even if you only get one for the season. But so I'm going to touch on that because I don't know what awards are being mentioned next Monday on the 20th. I'm recording this on the Monday, so a week before that. But I just thought, just in case they go through a lot of awards, I may as well do my Dally M episode today. And then obviously going to preview the semi-finals, aren't they? 2 semi-finals this upcoming week. But firstly, into the first week of finals, it was a bit of a weird one, really. I said last week there weren't going to be many upsets. There was one, and it was pretty close. So in that sense, I wasn't too far off. But the game I think everyone was most excited for probably turned out to be the biggest fizzer. The Storm versus the Seagulls on Friday night. I don't know. I said on the podcast, I think the Storm will win, but I don't think it'll be by much. Like, I think I maybe said 15 to 20 points somewhere in there. But on Friday and leading up, I just had this sneaking suspicion. I know this sounds like I'm just saying this, and a bit of confirmation bias probably makes me feel a bit better about it. But I did have a feeling like it wouldn't shock me if the Storm blow Manly out. They'd all had a week off. Everyone was sort of starting to write them off. I think Michael Lennis had them 3rd in his power rankings, which I just think was ridiculous. I will give myself credit. I've had them number 1 in my power rankings all season. I haven't wavered on that one. But, there was a lot of people backing in Panthers for the premiership, a lot of people backing in Manly. And I just thought this is the kind of situation where Melbourne put on a real performance and sort of just show everyone who's boss yet again. So, and that's exactly what happened. The Storm had 61% possession and completed at 90%. So those two combined, really hard to beat them pretty much. You need to get Storm on a day where they maybe are a little bit less disciplined than usual, but that's very, very rare. And they've just got too much skill to, when they have 61% possession, you're not going to beat them really. Unless you have one of the luckiest performances ever. And then, 90% completion. That's obviously something they thought of if they just have more ball than the opposition. Even if the opposition has the likes of Turbo and stuff, they just back themselves to be good enough to win the game, which makes sense. The Storm had 5 line breaks, 36 tackle breaks, which are both pretty incredible considering Manly hardly had any. I think they had 0 line breaks in general. And the Storm had 650 metres more than Manly, which is pretty incredible. Manly had 9 errors and 9 penalties. So unlike the Storm, Manly were very ill-disciplined. The 9 errors is not actually outrageous in isolation, but I think the Storm only had like 5. So you compare it to some of the other games and it doesn't sound ridiculous, but when you put those two together, 18 turnovers, I guess you could say. You're not really helping your chances. Also, something interesting I noted, they only use 5 interchanges, and I never checked this stat in my life, but I don't know if Manly have always been doing this, but I thought that was a pretty weird thing to be doing. I know some of their bench isn't that experienced, and the likes of Olaquato and Schuster can play 80 minutes, but I just thought that was pretty bizarre to only be using 5 interchanges. It seems like it's somewhat of a disadvantage, especially when you're up against such a good forward pack like Melbourne's. Another thing, obviously, you got to address it. Turbo didn't have the normal impact that he has, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who come out and say he's crap and all this stuff, or he's no Jared Hayne. But he's still a great player. Don't get me wrong. Would not shock me if he comes out and puts on a clinic this week. But something I do have to question is Turbo only had 20 touches. And this is the first time he's had less than 30 touches since round 7. So a whole 10 less touches. And that's pretty significant. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm over analyzing this. I think the first 15 minutes he was really up for the fight, like really wanted to put on a show. I think he got met with some physicality, some rough tactics really from Melbourne. I think Felice Kafusi, as he so often does, came out and, nothing illegal, but they were definitely pushing the boundaries of what's allowed in tackles. And I'm not saying he's soft or anything, but after that first 15, and I know he wasn't having as much success, so maybe Manly thought that's not working, let's go do something else. But when you've been tearing up the competition as much as Turbo has, I just think he's earned the right, and Manly should have enough faith in him to just keep going for the whole 80 minutes, or maybe for at least 60 minutes, or just do it here and there, not just go 15 minutes. If it doesn't work, we pull out for the rest of the game. Because, yeah, I don't know if it was a tactical thing or Turbo just didn't want the ball. I did notice his positioning was a lot worse in the second half. It did almost seem like he was a bit rattled and he didn't really want the ball in the second half, which it could be true. I could be over analyzing it, as I mentioned, but for me, touches is, I know you're going to get more touches the more effective you are, but touches is something that you can control. You can't control how many meters you get necessarily. Sometimes the defense is just going to be really onto you. You can't control how many line breaks you get because, yeah, as I mentioned, the defense might be too good, but you control how many times you get the ball. And I just found that really bizarre, and that's what I was disappointed in from Turbo. I think he only had like 8 touches or something in the second half, so yeah, that was really disappointing from me. I didn't care that he had an off game. He was due an off game. He was against the best defense in the competition, but the fact that he didn't really go searching, it didn't. I think he had a run 5 meters out with 10 to go, and that was sort of something we hadn't seen since the first 15 minutes, and that sort of sparked this thinking. But yeah, I think that was a bit disappointing from Turbo. But don't get me wrong, Gunplayer always was due for an less effective game, and I think he might be back this week. But just thought I'd mention that. I thought that was a bit disappointing. Morgan Harper also had a real shocker. He's had a great season, but it's started from word one, really. He sort of was at fault for that first try. Cherry Evans not with the greatest pass, but just went straight through his hands, and can't remember some of the others, but I think he had 3 errors all up. Only had like 60 meters. He just wasn't his usual self. I was listening to on the Saturday morning. I watched the Bloke in a Bar and Hello Sport did a live reaction to it, and Kempy of Bloke in a Bar mentioned that someone like him, who's like a very passionate, energetic player, anyways, they sometimes maybe try and lift another gear for finals when they don't really need to because they're already at that level on a regular basis. So that he was saying maybe he was trying too hard, which I definitely could see that being true. Someone like Morgan Harper, who hasn't really made a name for themselves on the mainstream stage yet, maybe wanted, to put his name in bright lights, but he just wasn't playing his best footy. And there's calls for Moses Suli to come in. I think that would just be ridiculously drastic. This is the team that people were saying could win the premiership on Friday morning before they got towed up here, so I don't think you make changes to the lineup personally. On the Storm side of things, however, Welch, Pappenhausen and Munster were all massive. The 3 best players on the park for Melbourne. Pappenhausen looks pretty much straight back to his best. His just turns of speed are almost unstoppable, and it makes you understand why everyone was saying maybe he's better than Teddy in the first month of the competition when it was the tiniest gap. Olaquatu pushed out a little bit too much. Cherry Evans didn't really slide, and Pappenhausen just went bang. And within a second, he was through that gap. And yeah, he made Cherry Evans look foolish a couple times. Munster was really good. His kicking game was good. Sort of thought this would be a bit of a bounce back game from Munster. He's not had his best season, but he's the best big game player in the competition. And Welch, I think, showed that he's the best prop in the game in the big games. Obviously, Payne Haas would have something to say about that, but in Clubland, we don't really see him in the big game, so hard to say. But yeah, Welch was immense. Isaac Lumi, probably the only negative to come out of Friday night. I think he was playing because he was playing because Adokar was injured. And George Jennings was on the other side, and they weren't playing Dean Ieremia, but he had a real shocker. Adokar should be fit by the prelim, but if he's not, that'll be a big call for Bellamy to make, whether he brings in Ieremia, because, yeah, Lumi was really suspect under the high ball. And you would guess that they're going to play Penrith in that prelim, and you don't want one of your back three being dodgy under a high ball with Nathan Cleary kicking spiral bombs at you. So, yeah, that was probably the only negative for the Storm, but I'm sure Adokar will be back by then. So that should be all good. Into the first Saturday game. This was a game I highlighted as a potential upset. I thought the Titans had the best chance of upsetting their highest seed, their opponent, out of the four underdogs this weekend. Didn't end up being right, but was very close. Came down to the final play of the game. Game of the year for me. I think I've said it a couple times this year on the podcast, but honestly, what more could you want from a game of rugby league than what happened in this? I don't think there's much more that you can tick off. There was 25 errors, so you could argue it's not a good game just purely based off that fact. But if you watch it, you wouldn't know that was the case. It was just back and forth all day, lead changes. Every time the Titans scored, the Roosters would just bounce back. Some of the stats I found pretty impressive. The Titans tackled at 91.7% tackle efficiency, which is just immense, especially against such a talented team like the Roosters. Daniel Tupou, James Tedesco, Matt Ikuvalu all had at least 170 metres out of the backfield, and they were a massive reason why the Roosters ended up getting up. The Roosters had a costly error in their own 10-metre line when Matt Ikuvalu dropped it straight into Wallace's hands, who sort of just had to dive over the try line. For me, I was obviously going for the Titans, as I like the Titans and I usually do go for underdogs. But for me, after the game, I was sort of like, well, maybe it's justice that the Roosters got through there, because I know it's still part of the game, it's rugby league, but at the end of the day, if they lost and that was like the final try the Titans scored, Matt Ikuvalu just giving them the ball, that would have been pretty crazy. The Roosters forwards were also massive for them. CSC Takiaho injured himself after just being on the field for 2 minutes. Sam Walker only played 9 minutes, and Fletcher Baker only played 8 minutes. So, some of the minutes in that forward pack were impressive. Warrior Hargraves had like 190 metres or something. Tupouniua and Crichton were huge on the edges. Isaac Liu was also massive, playing against his future club, which was a bit interesting. But the Roosters forwards have been great all year and were once again. On the Titans side of things, however, Jaden Campbell, absolute star. I was just talking to my dad when we were watching this game, and honestly, this is probably the best rookie class I've ever seen. I'm sure you could go back through the archives and find a better one, but just on their first year alone, I've never seen a group of players come in and have such impact on their clubs. We'll talk about it in a bit more depth in the Dally M Rookie of the Year award that we're going to do later in the episode. But Jaden Campbell, not saying AJ Brimson's a bad player, obviously he's an Origin representative, but yeah, Jaden Campbell has just seemed to add an absolute spark to this team that they were lacking. Sam Walker has really impressively filled a hole in that Roosters lineup, steering them around for 17 games at halfback. Reece Walsh filling the shoes of Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. You'd have hardly noticed there was a change there. He was that good. Josh Schuster's been immense for Manly. Utua Kamanu and Dane Laurie for the Tigers were awesome in a struggling team. So, yeah, honestly, I don't think there's been a better rookie class than Jaden Campbell. If he had played more games, could definitely be in the running for that Rookie of the Year award, because he has been huge ever since he has been given an opportunity for the Titans. And I don't think it's confirmed, but I definitely think if they can get Campbell at 1, Brimson at 6 next year, and they get Brimson firing, I think that's going to be a lethal combination. And then other players that I thought were really good for the Titans, Brian Kelly and Patrick Herbert, I thought played really, really well in the centres. Both had over 10 metres of carry, big bodies, and they definitely made the most of that. Obviously, Herbert was part of the unfortunate ending. I'll be honest, live, I was actually yelling, just go yourself. And I still think if he just held onto the ball and just kept trucking, I think he might have got there, but in the end, he went for the miracle flick pass. It's a tough one because it's one where you sort of commit to yourself and then you go, oh crap, I might not score, flick it out the back. But I know everyone on replay saying that he should have given it to Fafita. And I think he should have given it to Fafita if he went early. But after he'd sort of committed to running, it was pretty hard because he would have had to like go back inside and sort of predict Fafita's angle. But yeah, I don't think you can be too harsh. I think everyone's being too harsh on Herbert. I understand Thompson yelled at him, and that's just passion. And I'm sure they, had a beer after the game, and everything was fine. But yeah, I think you can't really overanalyze a situation like that because, it's probably the most precious situation you can do. And there was maybe about 4 or 5 options he could have done, and unfortunately, the one he picked just didn't work. So yeah, I felt bad for Herbert after a really good game. And then in the forwards, Mo Fodawaker, Jared Wallace, and Tino Fasuamalawi were immense. Honestly, Fodawaker and Tino are so good. Wallace was like legit playing like a ball playing lock at times. He was so agile and his ball playing was impressive. They all had over 130 meters, those 3 guys. Tino and Mo also had 33 tackles. Mo didn't miss a single tackle. Fodawaker was also huge in the last 10, just when they needed a lift. Obviously, there was a little bit of controversy surrounding the field goal with the blockers and stuff. I listened to the NRL briefing with Graham Annesley today, and it sort of clears it up. It sounds like the rule will be changed in the off season, but they weren't breaking the law. It's hard to argue. I just think it's tough. It's a tough one because Mitch Rain, can't run the direct line because Warrior Hargraves is there. Sadly, they've been letting them do it all year and for quite a few years now, actually. So, I think it's something that will be addressed in the off-season. But for now, unfortunately, I don't think Titans have much of a case. I think if it happens for the rest of the finals, I'll give you the hint now based on what I heard in that briefing. I think players will run into the blocker and hit the deck and make the ref make a call. That's just what I think will happen because a journalist asked that, and Annesley said that would be a completely different situation, and if they are deemed to be in the way, it would be a penalty. So if that happens, don't say I didn't tell you. That moved us into the Saturday night game, Panthers versus Rabbitohs. Low scoring game, typical finals. Only 3 tries were scored. And I know, Paul Kent has ruled the Panthers out, and I think that's a bit extreme. They've definitely made things harder for themselves. It looked like after Friday night that a Penrith-Melbourne grand final was almost a lock, but the Rabbitohs got the job done, and fair play to Wayne Bennett. Arguably one of the best wins of his career. They were right up against it. Their best player not in the team. And it was just huge from the Rabbitohs. They all just put in 100%. It wasn't the greatest viewing, especially after the Roosters-Titans game. But, Penrith just looked really tired. I don't know if the conditions played a part. Obviously, more humid and hot up in North Queensland than it is in Sydney and even Southeast Queensland. But both teams play in the same conditions, so you can't really use that argument. But they just look tired. I think Jerome Luai, obviously it's easy to bash on a player after they've lost and not so much when they've been winning, but I do think since Origin, Jerome Luai has been pretty quiet. He was awesome at the start of the year, but now, I don't know. I looked at his stats for the game. He had 7 runs for 49 meters, only kicked it twice. He just didn't have much impact on the game. And I think, I know Cleary is the best kicker in the game, and he's also the best halfback in the game, but I still think you need that balance to be a potent offense. If you get Luai firing, because right now defenses basically know they're going to give to Cleary, and the only time really Luai gets the ball is when Cleary gives it to him. So I do think they could maybe get that balance a little bit more even. In the forwards, Kikau and Yeo are really, really good. I'm not the biggest fan of Kikau usually, but I thought he played really well on the weekend. And Isaiah Yeo, good as always. On the south side of things, Blake Taft did a very, very good job at fullback. Had a couple of mistakes, but all in all, for a young man only playing like his fifth game or something, whatever it was, yeah, super stuff on the big stage. You would have known it was his fifth game. For me, Campbell Graham was man of the match. Yeah, he just seemed to be making the big tackles when it counted. He was obviously playing up against that dangerous Penrith left edge, and yeah, he was just snuffing out all opportunity. Luai, Burton, To'o, they didn't have much impact on the game, and I think Campbell Graham had a huge say in that. I think for me, this is a bit of a breaking out. Like, I know he's been in the Origin camp and stuff like that, but for me, this is a bit of a breakout game for him. I've always seen his skill, but I've never quite seen him like really dominate a game. And I thought defensively he was the best player in the park. For South, I also thought Cody Walker had his best big match performance. I mentioned in last week's podcast, this is like the final chance I'll give Walker. If he performs badly on another big stage, I'll officially never say he's a great player. But yeah, he was really good, I thought, especially early when the game was on the line. I know it was on the line the whole 80 minutes, but I thought he was really, really good. And yeah, that's something he hasn't been able to do in previous big games. So that's huge for him and the Rabbitohs. Moving forward, Tom Burgess had 212 metres off the bench, which is absolutely insane for a forward in a finals match against one of the best forward packs in the comp. So fair play to Tommy Burgess. Jai Arrow had a massive impact off the bench as well. I think he's sort of given them that edge in that forward pack they've been missing the last couple of years. They've sort of lacked depth in the forwards recently, and yeah, him and Burgess coming off the bench is just dynamic, and he really gets under the skin of the opposition as he was doing, and the Bunnies were more disciplined than the Panthers at the end of the day, which is important. Obviously, the big headlines coming out of this one, the press conference beef. If you actually watch the press conference, I don't think it was that like hectic. What Ivan Cleary was saying was true, saying that like it's a bit weird that you can't say stuff about the referees after a game, but if you say it during the week, you don't get fined, which is interesting. He said he's admitted to doing it before, but he said that needs to be looked at, which I think like fair point. And yeah, Ivan Cleary just has this way of speaking. He's very measured about things, so he's very persuasive. You'd have to say for people to get behind his point. But yeah, he was also talking about he doesn't think coaches should be allowed to call up refs and have like direct contact with them because like he thinks it's a little bit like intimidating or whatever, and he reckons maybe that played. He was saying his players were getting told stuff about maybe blocking for Cleary that during the game that they've never been told before. So yeah, I get like it's an interesting point. I didn't really know there was as much dialogue between the clubs and the ref as there was. The refs, it makes sense, and I was saying maybe they shouldn't, but like I talked to my dad and he's like, nah, they deserve the chance to talk about some interpretations, and that is true. But yeah, I don't know, it's an interesting one, but Cleary wasn't really like blaming Wayne Bennett. He was genuinely just talking about the issue in general, where Bennett sort of fired some shots at Ivan Cleary, saying he used to work there, he's got mates there, they probably get the benefit of calls and stuff. Wayne Bennett's it was pretty funny press conference. If you haven't watched it, go watch them. It's pretty, like it's a bit soap opera stuff from the press conference. But that moved us into the final game, Eels Knights on the Sunday. Wasn't keen for this one. Ended up being a decent game. Higher scoring than I was expecting. Eels 28 to Knights 20. Controversial penalty try at the end, but ultimately I don't think it had that much bearing on the result. I think the Eels were always going to get over the line. Once again, go watch the NRL referees briefing if you want to hear the judgment on that penalty try. Graham Annesley talked about it pretty well. Mitch Moses played really well. I've been critical of him in the past. I think he's a bit of a flat track bully, and I know the Knights aren't the greatest opposition, but he ran the ball a lot, which is something he sometimes forgets that is one of his greatest skills next to his kicking game. He's just an awesome runner. He's really fast and he's got great elusiveness. And I think it was the try he scored when he just ran straight, or maybe he assisted a try. I can't remember, but he ran straight between Saifidi and Clemmer. And yeah, there was this 10-week period for the Tigers where he played really, really well, and that's what he was doing. Like he was taking the game on running. And I think sometimes he steers away from that too much, and it was good to see him doing that again. He played awesome. Ponga really played well. I questioned his abilities last week. I said he hasn't had a great season. Still stand by that, but I think he had his best performance of the year. Some beautiful cutout passes. That one, I think Tuala's last try, absolute rocket, took the defense completely out of the equation. He's unstoppable at times, and I think they were making a conscious effort to give him more ball and in better positions. Mitchell Pearce played really poorly though, and I don't think he's helped his case for staying at the Knights next year. I know he's signed up, so it's not really their choice, but I definitely think if a club comes in for an offer, even if they have to pay a little bit of his salary, I think they'll take it because yeah, unfortunately, like it's a tough one because I think they've built this squad to be in a premiership window. However, the coach timing and the squad timing hasn't really lined up well. So I think they've not got to like rebuild, but I think they've got to aim again for maybe in 4 years or something. Because yeah, right now they're still a fair way off. But you know they've signed Gagai. They're linked to Tarek Sims. We'll see how that goes. I don't know if that will happen, but yeah, the rest of the team's still pretty young. I think Clemmer leaves this year. He's off contract. They've still got the Saifidi boys, Mitch Barnett. Connor Watson's been let go. So yeah, it wouldn't shock me if they've obviously brought in Clifford. So it wouldn't shock me if they do like a mini, not a rebuild, but a mini like stagnation to try and launch again for maybe a 2025 premiership because although their squad's really, really good right now, just with the coaching situation, I don't think they're really going to be in the conversation anytime soon. So I wouldn't. I think Pierce should leave personally. On the Para side of the ball, Will Penasini, absolute freak. Every time I've watched him, I've been so impressed. He's so good defensively. And then that flick pass to Fergo, I don't even know how he got it out, honestly. I swear his arm didn't move. It was just all wrist. And he somehow flung it out. And yeah, the camera was even like, where did that go? But only 19 years old, looks like he's 25, but I reckon he's just going to be not as good as Josh Morris, but like he gives me that kind of vibe. Like he's just going to be a dependable, reliable centre for so many years to come. Isaiah Papali'i had 194 meters in 56 minutes off the bench, 71 post contact meters. I was shocked he came off the bench, to be honest, because I actually hadn't checked the team list. And then once I saw what he did off the bench, I was like, yeah, fair play, Brad Arthur. I have to say, I'm not sure about Brad Arthur as coach, but he made some good calls here. Ray Stone playing hooker was his next good call. Obviously, he didn't have like a dynamic running game or anything, but he made 50 tackles in 54 minutes. Honestly, I think he's still a free agent for next year. If I was the Tigers fan talking, I'd go sign him up because he plays with passion, plays with soul. And yeah, he's a really, really good defender, which is rare to see these days. Also on the night side, Inari Tuala and Heimel Hunt played pretty well out the back. But that moves us on to just the headlines. I've just got one today before we move into the Dally M portion. I also got to do the power rankings. They moved the Storm prelim today, and I'm pumped about this. I couldn't believe that there was going to be an NRL prelim and AFL grand final clashing. I know the AFL moved their grand final into our prelim time slot, but I think logic has prevailed and the NRL has brought the Storm prelim forward. I'm sure it. Actually, I don't even know if it will hurt the ratings actually, because they were probably going to lose ratings to the AFL. I think any NRL fan who doesn't think this is a good move is a bit of an idiot and a bit like I don't want to be attacking because I know everyone has their opinions, but I think you're a bit stubborn if you think this is a bad move. Ultimately, I know they're in competition, but I think fans. I have an interest in AFL. I live in Melbourne, so I would like to watch the grand final, but I'd also like to watch the Storm prelim. So I'm grateful for this, and I think there's a lot of people in my position who they might not be AFL fans, but they certainly have an interest in watching their biggest game of the year. So I'm grateful they've done it. For people who say it's like an inferior move, it's a backward step for Peter V'landys. Yeah, as I mentioned, I just think AFL and NRL are at each other's throats a little bit too much at times, and I think there's enough people in Australia to have two big winter codes, and I can't see why they can't do well harmoniously together. But anyways, that's another chat for another day, but very glad the NRL did that. Common sense did prevail. Power rankings, huge change in this one, and this is really controversial. Obviously, I got the Storm one, pretty self-explanatory, put on a clinic, looking sure things for the grand final. Now, this is weird, but this is how the draw has ended up. I've actually changed my order, and it's seen me put Manly at number 2. I know it sounds stupid because they got pumped by Melbourne, but anything can happen in the grand final. You've just got to be there. You've got to buy a ticket to win the lottery, as they say. So you got to be there. And I just think with the Seagulls draw, I think they're next to the Storm. I think they're the second most likely team to make the grand final. I honestly do. I know the Rabbitohs just beat Penrith, so arguably they should be the number 2. But I just think the fashion they did it, it was really tough. It was really hard. It was gritty defense, but I don't think it like impressed me in terms of like attacking flair or whatever. And I think the Manly could beat the Rabbitohs. So I've got Manly second, Rabbitohs third because of that factor. And then I've got Penrith fourth, sadly. I don't think they're the fourth best team in the comp, don't get me wrong, but I just think their draw now, if they go on to win the premiership here, it's going to be one of the best wins ever because that's going to be huge. Coming up against, well, Parramatta's not going to be easy this week, and then trying to beat the Storm the week after, it's going to be really tough for Ivan Cleary's men. And then I've got the Roosters in at 5th. I know they're on the easier part of the draw, but I still think beating Manly, the Titans, Manly, and Rabbitohs, I still think winning all those 3 games for this injury-riddled squad will be really tough. And then I got Parry in at 6. They have to beat Panthers and Storm in back-to-back weeks. Really tough. All right, Dally M Awards time. I'm going to go through all the awards, starting with Rookie of the Year. I think Sam Walker's locked and loaded, baby. 17 games, starting halfback for the Roosters. However, this is not about what I think will happen. It's what I believe should happen, who I think the Rookie of the Year is. Now, look, I've found this one weird. I didn't think Sam Walker was the best player, but ultimately, a lot of recency bias in that he hasn't been playing halfback the last 6 weeks. And I thought it was Reece Walsh personally. However, I've looked at some stats. Reece Walsh has played a lot less games than I thought as well. So I think Walker should get it just ahead of Walsh, and then Schuster should be third. But I think it should be really close. However, because it's done on Dally M vote, so it wouldn't be surprised if it's a whitewash, because Schuster probably will struggle to pick up votes in Manly, and Reece Walsh is playing in a team that lost a lot of games. So I think Walker could cruise to that one. Captain of the Year, I've given it to James Tedesco. I just think the way he's led his team through really tough times, at points, he probably didn't even know some of the blokes he was playing with. And I will say about Teddy, he's become a bit of a whinger, as a lot of captains do. But ultimately, this is a tough award because we don't really know what a captain's like. But I just think the way he's week in, week out, he leads by example. He's one of those captains. He's not like, the loudest talker, but yeah, he leads by example, always plays 9 or 10 out of 10 each week. And yeah, I think he's a huge reason why the Roosters made finals and are still in the competition. Coach of the Year, pretty much copy and paste what I just said. I've got Trent Robinson in there. I just think to come 5th and look at the outs he's had in his squad this year and the cap space they have, pretty impressive. And I don't think many other coaches could do it. You can always argue Craig Bellamy gets Dally M Coach of the Year, but for me, I think it's Trent Robinson. And there's a lot of people saying Des Hasler, but for me, there's no doubt that their improvement has stemmed from Turbo. And I know it's not solely Turbo because a lot of the other players have improved, but just the fact that they were so bad without Turbo and so good with him makes me not think that Desi should win this award. Try of the Year, I've given it to Manly's last try of the game against the Cowboys. I know this could be recency bias, but I honestly think that's the best try I've ever seen. Turbo's individual one in the same game could be a contender, but I just think Ruben Garrick running back, 80th minute last play, nothing to play for, and they score one of the great length of the field tries I've ever seen. I think it deserves it. Tackle of the Year, I know it's a bit weird that I'm going through these awards, but I'm doing it, baby. I went back and watched the tackles. Not many standout contenders like last year's Josh Papali'i ankle tap, but I'll give it to Xavier Coates. He made this chase down tackle at Suncorp on Dane Gagai. Gagai had about a 10-meter head start, ran 50 meters, tackled him over the sideline. Really, really good tackle, actually. But yes, I think I think the actual tackle of the year for me, it wasn't a tackle. Might have been Halum Lukey. Someone chased Reese Walsh down and they like grabbed his collar and tried to like sling him over the boundary, the sideline, and they like flung him into the try line and he scored. But for me, that was the funniest because he like chased down Reese Walsh, who's this pacey kid and everything. But anyway, Peter Frilingos headline moment of the year. This is a tough one because I tried to look back at the history and see the kind of things they give it to. For me, the things that have probably made the most headlines is the Magic Round Blitz that happened. Obviously, like 14 Simbin and send off combined, I think. I think that's the most of all time. And the media just went absolutely crazy that week. I don't think I've ever seen as much NRL stuff on social media in my life. And then obviously the Latrell thing. They were huge moments. Got the media talking the most, I think, from the year. But I don't know if they give them to negative things because to me that sounds a bit weird. So I'm going to say the Blues win in game one. I don't think anyone saw it coming. The Blues were the favourite as usual, but the Maroons won fairly convincingly last year. And yeah, the Blues just pumped them. I forget what the score was. It was like 46 to 4, 50 to 4, 52 to 6, something like that, something in that ballpark. But yeah, it was one of the most convincing Origin wins I've ever seen. No one was really expecting it in North Queensland as well. Yeah, I just think that is the headline moment of the year for me if they stay away from the somewhat negative stuff. I know the Magic Round Blitz isn't really negative, but most of the headlines were negative. All right, Dally M Team of the Year, and then I'll say my Player of the Year at the end because obviously my Dally M Team of the Year will give it away. Fullback, I've got obviously Tommy Turbo. Wing, I've got Brian Toto. Think he's been immense, and yes, he's obviously been injured, but still think he deserves it. Other winger, I've got Daniel Tupou. They're both in the top 10, I think maybe top 5 for average post contact meters a game, and I think that's one of the most important stats because that sort of just shows. Like I know meters before contact is important as well. Like if you're, getting 3 meters before contact and 4 after, you're not as good as a player getting 8 before. But I think everyone, like, you know what I mean. It's not so much skill getting to the contact. If you're working through it, getting 7 meters a tackle after being hit, I think that's really impressive. So I've got those two there. Justin Olam and Ryan Burton are my centers. I think the Manly boys are pretty stiff here. Remus Smith, stiff. Probably some others I'm forgetting. Joey Manu, also stiff, but I just think Justin Olam's been the best centre for me. Him and Addo-Carr is just a freakish combination. He's a crazy defender as well. So good at assisting Addo-Carr. And yeah, Matty Burton, surprise of the year, you'd have to say, being Dally M Centre of the Year. But yeah, I think he's been that good. He's so fast. He's so damaging. Yeah, I think he's a gun. And I think even at centre, his non-preferred position, he can win this award. 5'8", I've got Cody Walker. I think 5'8's a real weak point of the NRL right now. I thought about Jerome Luai because his first 10 weeks were awesome, but ultimately I think Cody Walker's run home has been too good. Nathan Cleary at halfback, not much of a discussion there. Jerome Hughes will get a lot of votes because Melbourne win a lot and he's been really, really, really good this year. But yeah, ultimately it's got to be Cleary, doesn't it? Prop, I've got Payne Haas. Any Broncos win, he probably gets 3 votes, and any Broncos loss, he probably pushes for 1 vote. But yeah, ultimately, I think he's the best prop in the game by some bit. Hooker, I've got Brandon Smith. He'll pick up a lot of votes, as I mentioned, for Jerome Hughes. Same thing, but also I believe he's been the best hooker in the game. Probably another spot like 5'8", where I don't think the competition's been that dominant this year. And hooker, obviously, Harry Grant on the bench. Damien Cook been poor. Coruscant's been hit and miss. Like that probably sounds a bit harsh. He's been good, but not outstanding. In the other prop, I've got Fanua Blake. I can't remember what metric I used. It was either post contact or just meters in general, and he was in like the top 5 for that, which I didn't know, and I didn't actually know he played like 16 games, so I put him in there. Like maybe I haven't watched him enough to be putting him in there, but I just remember last year for Manly, he was so damaging in some games. And to think if he's in like the top 5 for that stat, I can only imagine what he was doing with the eye test. Like he was probably tearing games up. David Fafita's my first second rower. how many tries he scored, 17, 18. Like, that's crazy from a back rower, tackle bust machine. And I know he's sort of been used weirdly. Some people will question whether he's worth the money, but ultimately his performance alone gets him in this team. And then second row is Isaiah Papali'i. Maybe he hasn't had the finish to the season that. Well, I know I just said he played awesome on the weekend, but he hasn't been playing back row. He hasn't been playing back row recently, so you could argue, does he deserve to be back row? But for me, like, first 15 weeks, he was awesome. He's probably buy of the year by some margin. Lock, I've got Cam Murray, just snubbed Isaiah Yeo, but I've got Murray in there. Think he's been immense for the Rabbitohs. Yeah, just a gun. Glad they've stopped trying him on the edge because he's a middle forward, absolute beast defending, and he's also so fast and so good on his feet. He's just, yeah, perfect lock. And then interchange, this was a really tough one. Harry Grant, I tried to make it so they played a minimum of 12 games in that position. Nico Hines hadn't played enough games. Harry Grant hadn't played enough games. The other candidates, Stefano Utoikamanu, he's been pretty good. But I went with Tom Starling. I just think when he comes on for the Raiders, I've sort of hyped him up the last couple episodes if you've been listening. But I think when he comes on for the Raiders, they become a better team. And yeah, he's just a really, really damaging hooker. Loves running out of the dummy half position. Yeah, gun tackler. Yeah, I just love Tommy Starling, and he's my interchange player of the year. That moves us into the finals week 2 preview. Not too much to talk about this week because I'm recording it on a Monday. No team lists out as such. Seagulls, Roosters, both games are in Mackay, interestingly. I don't hate it though, get around it. Seagulls, Roosters, Sam Verrills could potentially be banned for 1 to 2 weeks. That would be a huge out. I think he should be suspended. He pretty badly hit Brian Kelly in the head. Should have been sin-binned. But anyways, I think you'll be rubbed out. I wonder what they're going to do, whether they play Radley at hooker or Ben Marshke. Might be a bit of both. They might do like Brandon Smith sort of thing, or like the inverse, actually. They might start Radley at lock, Marshke at hooker, and then after like 20 minutes, put Marshke on the bench because he hasn't been playing much footy. Radley in a hooker, or they might do the cheese thing, I don't know. But that's definitely their main options. Look, I think the Roosters will make it tight. I don't think the Roosters will get blown out. But yeah, I've just got to back Manly. I know last week was a real stinker for them, but I think they will want to prove the critics wrong. Obviously, the 3 games on the weekend were all pretty close, so a lot of the negative energy is being put towards Manly's way, and it deservedly does. It was a poor performance, but I think Turbo bounces back. I think Cherry Evans bounces back, and all the other players who weren't happy with their performance. I think Manly win it. I know it's a boring call, but the line's 10.5. I'm probably going to back Manly at the line as well, actually. I think it might be like 3 tries in it. Don't think it will be a huge margin, but yeah, Manly by like 16 for me. Panthers versus the Eels. This is tough because the Eels are defending really well and the Panthers are not attacking well. So for me, it's going to be a close game. I don't think... Oh, they scored 28 points, but it was against the Knights. I don't think Para's attack is good enough to break the Panthers' defense, personally. The Rabbitohs struggled to do it, and they're a much better attacking team than the Eels. So for me, the Panthers definitely win. I'm sure I've just given them the kiss of death, saying definitely. But I'm probably going to take the Eels at the line. The line's 11.5 in the Panthers' favour, but yeah, I think I'll back it in to be a close game. I think the Eels' goal line defense is one of the best in the competition, and yes, the Panthers are likely going to come out wanting revenge after last week's poor performance, but yeah, I think it'll be close, as most finals games are. I don't think Panthers will score many points. I foresee like maybe a 26. No, that's too many points for Parramatta. I think maybe Penrith win 22-12, something like that. And then I'll guess the Seagulls Roosters scoreline. I'll back in Manly to win 30-16. Yeah, so they're my final tips. Let me know yours in the comments below. Been another huge episode of the On the Ball podcast, NRL edition. Stay tuned this week for more NFL and AFL content, and obviously clips of this and other content that I've done recently in NRL. I'm about to sneeze, so I'm trying to rush through this one. Maybe also some EPL content coming. But yeah, stay tuned for more. Get around us on social media. Get around us in the comments. Like the video, like the potty, whatever you're doing. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week. Bye.